Welcome to Ben Nevares podcast with your host, Ben Nevares.
Howdy, hi, and welcome back to the podcast. I'm going to decrease this guy right here real quick just so we don't have to see it the entire time. Today, we have a very special guest. We have Mr. Mario, and the first time I ever said your last name was, I think, something like gnocchi, and it is not gnocchi.
No.
It is Giancini. Did I say
That's
that?
correct, yeah.
I got it right this
Giancini.
time.
I mean, if we were in Italy, you would say Giancini, but
Giancini.
we're not. Unfortunately, we're here.
We can still say it.
We can still say it like that.
We're culturally
Diverse.
diverse.
Yes.
Appropriate, accurate, all of these things.
Yes. Expanding our horizons with culture. So.
We are. So we have a lot of fun things to get into. One of those things, I guess, we're going to go straight into it, is self-engineer. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Beautiful. And so for our listeners, just so that we have an understanding, what is self-engineer?
That's a great question. Well, Self-Engineer is a personal development program that I developed that teaches tech professionals how to upgrade themselves like software using the skills they already have. I have a long history background in software engineering, as well as other backgrounds, creative, music, video, whatnot, and a long history of personal development, also my own journey, mentoring others. And I've combined all these elements into a program that I believe fits a very needed gap right now. And I want to help people in tech leverage their superpowers on themselves, because they use them on everyone else and everyone else's product and software application that they're building or other people. But it's very hard to apply those very good skill sets in your own life, and they could be leveraged in that way. So out of my own, let's say, personal development journey, from the ashes of that, I have put together a program that teaches people how to do that.
Beautifully said. Well
Thank
said.
you.
What started your personal development journey? What prompted you to go on this search? And were you always an inquisitive? Sorry,
No.
maybe too
Go for it.
many questions. But were you always an introspective individual?
I think so, yeah. I think if you ask people who know me well, they would probably say yes. I've always been introspective, more introvert leaning, and more leaning into my curiosity. But I would say the journey for personal development kind of has always been there since like early adulthood. I've often felt that I was not being fully who I am, or I kind of felt like uncomfortable in my own skin, and I didn't know why. I was kind of having this like low-lying panic of like something doesn't feel right. And I've spent a lot of what I realized is that I spent a lot of my adult life subtly lying to myself in order to please other people or avoid uncertainty or not knowing how to deal with it. And so I was constantly looking for answers of like, okay, how do I deal with this? I was given some tools and had some foundational things that were very good from my upbringing, from my earlier life. But as I got into adulthood, things didn't really add up. And I had a lot of struggles in relationships, understanding who I was. So I just wanted answers. And it was a long journey, but it was worth it.
It's a hard journey.
Very hard journey. Most people, I feel like, are adverse to taking that journey because it requires a lot of kind of like going backwards in a way. It's harder to dig into yourself and really figure out what the root causes are. And I feel like there's unfortunately still not so much now, I would say, but in recent years, there was a stigma with like personal development or therapy or counseling or trying to like, spend the time to really understand yourself. Thankfully, I think that's changed a little bit, but there's still a gap, I think, with self-help in general in the world that we live today. And I would say that gap is that because of, the technology, the internet, the social media, AI, things of that nature that we have to deal with, we don't realize how limited our available attention is. And so to make the changes that I think that you could historically with just picking up a good self-help book or going to a couple, counseling sessions or doing a course by yourself, it's harder for that to stick and it's harder for that to really get through all the other noise. And so that's part of the reason why I also built Self-Engineer program, is to kind of set up a filtering system to limit those external points of reference so that you can really dig into yourself and figure out the root causes. Because in summary, I feel like self-help is symptomatic. Like you have a problem and I go, oh, because this problem, now I'll go try to fix it with this one tactic or this one book or this one thing. Whereas we need more of an engineering approach in this age. We need to look at our whole life as like a whole product, as a whole entity, and figure out where the root causes are, and then consciously reprogram it and not just be like, oh, I'm going to, do this one challenge for a week, or I'm going to, be 1% happier, or, do these habit stacking tactics, or do this or that. And tactics are great, but what I feel like usually happens, and I know I'm getting long-winded on this, I apologize.
It's okay.
But what usually happens, what I've seen, what I've also experienced, is that you start a habit, a pattern, a tactic, life happens, and then all that gets kind of erased. And you go back to this base level of where that foundational change should have happened, but hasn't happened yet. And so we go through this cycle of frustration and like, I'm trying to change, but I can't change, or I want to be better, but I can't be better. And that's why I think that modern self-help right now is broken.
There's a lot in there.
Yeah, sorry.
No, it's okay.
I said a lot.
It's okay. I'm like, oh, that's a good. That's a good. That's a good. But I think it's important for people to, I think, hear the train of thought. Like, how does somebody who is in the middle of going, like, that has went through and is still going through their own personal development and their perception of it, and then how are they going to be communicating that over to a large body of people? So I think it's important to at times be long-winded so people can really appreciate you, right? Like,
thank you.
Whenever we get to sit down and we listen to you, it's authentically you. And I think that there's something really beautiful about that and the opportunity to do a podcast. And I would love to, whenever I'm watching somebody, I love the opportunity to like hear all of it. And then when somebody like cuts in way too often, then I'm like, but like there could have been something there. Now, if the entire podcast is this person just fucking being long-winded, then that's another thing.
Not appropriate.
Yeah, but like it's because then you're not like allowing the opportunity to like really deep dive into specific items.
Yeah.
And so I think it's important to speak your truth, if you will.
Yeah, I think that's very important.
Yeah.
I also think a good marker of a good podcast host is someone who allows that to happen. Because I've, listening to podcasts for decades now, I don't know, long time. But the ones that I've really appreciated are the ones that kind of just ask questions to bring out the person. And they allow that person to, like you said, speak their truth and give it enough room, even if it is a little bit of a tangent or a little bit of a long-winded response. I think there's value in that because we don't, in other areas of life, we don't get to see that long-form explanation or engagement in that way, and I think there is value in that. So just to double down on your point. Yeah.
Breaking the fourth wall a little bit, which is kind of cool.
That's
Talking
fun.
about the podcast, about a podcast. Yeah.
Very meta.
Very meta. I think it's hard to even recognize like I need work if I'm lying to myself. Like how do I even understand, true. Okay, like at this point I need to find somebody to find help if I'm just telling myself that it's all these other things. It's my boss, it's my wife, it's my kids, it's all these external factors.
Yeah.
And it's so hard to really get clarity and say, oh wait, like what could I do to control these things? Right? So how do you make that transition, or how do you help somebody like realize that transition from the line and blaming of the external to truly owning and then taking action?
That's a good question. I think that there's a couple parts to that. One, I think the person kind of has to be ready. There's only so much you could do with, I think, a person to help them move along. If they're not ready to move or change or, face certain things in their life, then there's not much that you could do to like really make that happen. But if that person has at least a willingness to, then in my experience, it is a combination of empathy and guidance in helping the person kind of just realize that the answers are in themselves. Because it's not that like there's this magic formula that you could just put someone through blindly and they come out the other side and they're like, I'm better. It's great. I'm now, if only, right? Yeah. That's not how it works.
That'd be nice. It would be saves all so much time.
Everybody would be so amazing. Life would be very different.
Yeah.
But that's not the case. And usually it's that the person has a lot of the answers to their own questions, a lot of the actions that they need to take, they already know. There's a lot already in them. It's just buried. And having someone come alongside them to help clear the debris, give them space to express what that might be or not know what it is. That space and that guidance, I think, is what surfaces those answers. I was listening to your last podcast with Jazz, I believe it was.
Yeah.
And she said a number of things that I really agree with, which was kind of highlighting, reducing the external points of reference that we have. So that's kind of what this surfacing process is that it's hard to do that on your own because you have so many other external things vying for your attention. You know what I mean? You have, algorithms and apps that are designed to like steal your attention away. You have all these things of shoulds, cultural expectations, just so much that is on top of you and pressuring you. And if you don't remove that, you can never really get to those parts underneath you that kind of have those answers and that alignment and those things that you want. And so I think part of the approach is that having someone guide someone else alongside kind of a pathway they could take that is nuanced to them because it requires individuality, but you give them that space to explore, you give them the filtering to help them reduce those external points of reference, and now those things inside them can kind of like come up. And then you start having that discussion like, oh, wow, I didn't realize this part about me. I'm like, oh, this feeling is actually from a core limiting belief that I have that I just don't believe that I'm enough, so I'm not going to take that chance on that business or that thing that I want to do. And then you start to surface the things that are there, and then they could start making really impactful actions that get them moving in the direction that they want.
Is it something, I don't know, I'm just going to say as simple, but I don't know that it's necessarily simple, because there is an intent behind question asking and trying to like ask the right questions to get somebody to say the thing that they're truly thinking. And so is it as simple as asking the right questions like, well, why or how's, right? These, I think, like always start with why or start with why that book. And then at the, like, when do you use the question why? Because some people say that the question why is a little bit stabby. But ultimately, like, we're trying to prod an individual to prompt their own answers.
Mm-hmm.
But do you expose them to conversation? Is it exposing them to like some sort of external challenge? Like, how about we go for a jog and like, what is that internal chatter that you were really having during that time? Or like, like how do you find that person's truth?
Yeah, great thoughts. And you're, I would say, a very good expert on answering questions or asking questions and providing that space for someone to answer them. And, in our exchanges over the past year almost now, we've gotten to some really interesting and frothy questions very easily, I would say, but it's allowing that space for that prompting. And I think, to your point, I think what you're highlighting is that there is individual approach because everyone's kind of different. However, at a high level, it's the idea of asking those questions of the self. So it could be that it is an activity for some people because, like, for example, like when you and I are training, I'm in a different state because I'm pushing up weights. I'm I'm making progression towards something. I'm releasing emotion in a way because I've worked in front of screens all day or done something else and I get to push heavy weights and it feels great. And then you're asking me these questions in a different state and I'm like, oh yeah, I feel this way. I mean, you've seen the differences too of like what that could do. So I think different physical states do have an effect. But I also do think that it is the type of questions that you ask that help a person surface those things. That takes, I think, a little bit of time of preliminary questions of getting to know the individual first, maybe. That's how I have found that to be helpful. And then I think there's another set of questions that help surface the kind of the foundational limiting beliefs or issues that a person has. And that's kind of using, it's a phrasing that I use. It's called the self-recursive function, which is just a play on asking questions of yourself to get to core limiting beliefs. So to go on a little tangent here, in software, you have a type of function that's called a recursive function, which is set up in a way that it calls itself until it hits this state that equals true. So you can go down like a stack of calls until you get to a true state, and then it's done.
Cool.
At a very simplified version. So
thank you for that.
Yeah. So for anyone who's technical listening or engineer, they might be like, that's not quite exactly. Oh, yes, there's different nuance, but for all the non-technical people, that's what it is for the most part. So a self-recursive function is asking yourself layered questions until you get down to a true state. So it's helpful because I think people have a phrasing that I'm using that's kind of called layered lies, where you have like these surface level lies that you kind of tell yourself, and then below that there's like another layer, and then below that is like the core layer.
Interesting. I like
so
that.
I'll give you an example of mine. My like top layer level is that I don't want to or don't believe I should promote myself because I think my work should stand on its own, because I don't like the idea of marketing that much or like talking about myself that much. I'm more of an introvert. I'd rather talk about other people and like, surface what they have. That's just where I am. So it's a little bit uncomfortable for me to talk about myself. And so that comes down to the second layer, which is, well, why do I feel that way? Is because why do I want my work to show for itself? Well, because I believe that my value is in the value output I put out. So my value is derived by my work in a way, which is a common lie for masculine energies, people who kind of like derive their meaning from their work, there's some really good leverage from that because you can make amazing change, you can make amazing achievement from that. However, it's a double-edged sword if you let it rule who you are. So that's the second layer. The core layer is that I don't believe I'm good enough. People are going to find out that I'm not good enough, or I have imposter syndrome, or, something along those lines. So that's kind of an example of how you would go through it. You start with like the first fear that you're kind of coming up against, the first thing that's like the obvious one that you come up with on a daily basis. And then you ask yourself until you get to this like core place where it's like, oh, I'm afraid I'm going to die, or I don't believe I'll make it, or I'm not good enough, or nobody loves me, or you could see the layers that progress down to there. So that's kind of how I rephrase the self-recursive function. And it's helpful to see all those layers of lies that you tell yourself stacked in a way, because much of it is subconscious. You don't really think about it. It's just there. So
I think that I got to have some exposure to that your core truth is one that I've struggled with for a long time.
Yeah.
And I had the same idea. It was like, my work should be able to stand for itself. Like, I shouldn't have to market. I shouldn't have to, like, people should recognize, they should see what I'm doing and be like, damn, that guy's good. But
he is, by the way.
Thank you. I appreciate it. It took me a long time to even be able to own that. Like for a long time for whatever reason, I was like, I'm not a good enough trainer. I'm not a good enough, exercise physiologist. And then I got asked, well, what's good enough, Ben?
Right.
And I was like, I
Where's
don't know.
The gauge?
It's like, what's your 10? I don't have a 10. Huh. So you're never going to be good enough.
Yeah.
It's like, oh shit.
Oops.
Oops. Like either I got to find a 10 today, and then that 10 can always be, I think, there's a word I'm looking for, but it can be pushed or extended. It can adapt to my new situations. Let's say I'm in a small group setting and I see somebody as a 10, and then I can strive to be similar to them. And then I get myself into another group because of change, or because my skills now have put me, like now that I've reached the 10 in my group, I'm naturally exposed to different situations, different experiences, and then my frame of reference of a 10 gets reset.
Mm-hmm.
And so I've had that opportunity multiple times where I'm like, oh shit, I need a new 10 now, because I now I don't know another 10. I need somebody that I can be around that can like push me to this next level. But I don't know, and I very well could still have that underlying rationale of I don't think I'm good enough.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know that I've given it much thought, which means that I probably should.
I mean, I think that those the reason why they're core limiting beliefs is that they kind of will always be there. And it's going to be a part of your journey, that it's not that you eliminate it, it's that you manage it and you learn how to leverage it. Because those are foundational things that were probably set up before you even realized that it happened. Maybe something in childhood or young adulthood, or things that we can't quite point to, but have helped shape us in that way. So it's not so much about the elimination of it, or you don't have to meditate on it as much as it is being aware of it, and then instead of it being a limiting factor, using it more as a leverage point, because you know that's something that's there you have to manage. And it's kind of like a secret superpower, because if you could identify it and name it, you can then change your action based off that, as opposed to just subconsciously influencing you.
I'm going to be extra vulnerable, I guess. And so I think I can pinpoint it. I mean, there's several different instances where I remember growing up where it was, I'd get in trouble from my father, and he'd be like, you are not anything in this house. You are not worthy. Like you mean nothing. Like you're just somebody who lives in this house. And it was a routine. Like whenever he got upset, that would be the conversation. And I think that really stuck with me forever. That one, and then he
That's
also
powerful.
said never trust anybody. Don't even trust your parents. Everyone's gonna fuck you over. Don't trust anybody.
Oh man.
And I was like, oh my God, what am I supposed to do with my life? And then I got to therapy, and they were like, that's not normal. And I was like, oh, okay. And so I think what I go back and I remember, okay, there's other people out there that probably either don't feel worthy themselves, or just feel like at a loss of control. And so whenever maybe I'm feeling like I don't have control, and I feel that I start talking to myself as, hey, you're not worthy because of the external circumstances that may seem like you're out of your control. In reality, there's more around you that you can control, especially within yourself. And so if I, within myself, decide I'm going to go to this next marketing event, I'm going to go find myself a coach, I'm going to go do this thing, now I'm regaining control, and that would mean I am worthy because I can still do these things because I'm good enough for those things. But I don't know. Maybe that's
really interesting. Thank you for sharing that, by the way.
Yeah.
I know we talked a little bit before about some of your family upbringing and things of that nature, but that's definitely something that will shape your outlook, having those type of things said to you. And you said something there too. I think it is the idea of the element of control, where it is a way that we could help. I think that we naturally try to help navigate these limiting beliefs or limitations we've placed on ourselves. We look for these areas of control that we could garner, and I think that is, there is some use in that. I think what I've learned, or the balance in that, is that identifying the things that are actually in your control and focusing on those, and then everything else that's not in your control, kind of having a stoic philosophy about it, just like letting it go and releasing that. But that desire to control is there in all of us, really, because, we want to feel agency in our life. We want to feel like we could affect something in our life. And if we've been wronged in the past, or have some kind of unresolved conflict or unresolved, things from our origin, that can come up in trying to control things, and mainly trying to control things that are outside of our control. And usually you need what I've experienced anyway for me, having third-party observation, a counselor, a therapist, a mentor, guidance, helping you point out the things that like, well, actually you're focusing on something here that's outside of your control, what the world is doing right now, what the markets are doing right now, what another person is doing right now. Those are all things outside of your control. The only thing that you can control is your response and what your next step is, or the way that you think about it too.
I wonder if we're looking for control whenever we're like scrolling. Like that's our search for control. Like I get to decide when I'm, going to flip up and down. But in reality, you're so not in control at all, which is the weirdest thing. Yeah, it's the weirdest thing.
It's the exact opposite. It feels like control because you have a gesture and an outcome and a dopamine hit every time you do it. And so I think when I think of dopamine, I think of Andrew Huberman and what he said, that dopamine is basically, it's not, what was his words? But essentially it's the more chemical. It's not like a pleasure signal as much as it is the signal of, I want more, give me more, give me more. And there's an element of control of that because every time you do it, you affect some kind of change, even if it's just small. And so I found myself doing this too. And I think a lot of people do it, which is when you feel out of control or when you feel like you're overwhelmed, one of the easiest things that we have in reach right now is just to grab our phone and see what people are doing.
100%.
Because it's a distraction. You have immediate feedback, and it's something that you can control both physically and visually. So it's incredibly powerful and incredibly dangerous.
Incredibly. I was talking to Antonio, a coach that we share.
Yeah.
And shout out Antonio.
Shout out. He's awesome.
He is awesome. We'll put him stuff inside the bio or inside the description, or tag him inside this clip. I don't know. We'll see. Or all the above. Either way. He said that a lot of successful people have this. So in life, we have this thing, the thing we know we're supposed to do, and then taking action doing it, right? And then there's a time gap between those two things. And if the more you can shorten that time gap, ultimately the more stuff you can get done, the more successful you are. And so every time, for me, whenever I go and sit down and I'm just like, I just need to scroll for a little bit, it's remembering, what am I sacrificing to do this thing? There are people out there that need help. There are people out there who could really use some health in their life. And here I am fucking around on my phone, scrolling and laughing. Get up and let's get back to work. Like, what are we doing? And so I think that was really helpful for me.
I love that description, shortening the time frame between what you know you should be doing, the action. That's well said.
It's helpful.
It is.
So where does somebody start with that? Like, do we have, I don't know, maybe this is, I don't know if this is real, but like, do you have like a list of questions? Like, could I start today and say, I have 3 questions that I can ask myself today, or I have 5 questions I can ask myself today, and that'll get me started?
Yeah. I mean, what I would hope for anyone, listening to this, first of all, is just that they would spend the time to invest in themselves and really try to know themselves. And then when they do get that information, to do something useful with it, not just write it down and then say, great, I have a vision board, but never take action, close the time gap. Now you know what to do, take some action towards it. But some questions to your point, some of the basic ones I think are helpful because, if I asked you like what your core values are right now, I think what you've had them listed out before, but most people, from my experience and exchange with them, don't really know, and they're not sure how to answer that, or they take it like it's like, this is, if I just answer it now, that's what I'm going to be for the rest of my life, and that's not true either.
That's a wild fact.
Yeah, because so people are afraid to like commit to that in the moment. But I'll get into other questions, but sticking on this for a second with core values is the idea that people are afraid to commit because they think that once they make that commitment to, let's say, a core values or a goal, that they can never go back. And that's not true. But human psychological bias kind of reinforces that because, one, we don't want to see that we're like going back on our word. We want to prove to other people that we're doing something. So it's hard to backtrack or be brave enough to like take steps backward to first like look at the big picture and be like, okay, went that way, but maybe I should go this way. And then the other thing is that there is the sunk cost fallacy that is like a strong psychological bias that affects a lot of people in different ways, which is once they've invested into something, again, they feel like they can't make a different choice because they've already committed to that. So with the core values thing, it's the idea that it's what your core values are right now, and who you are in the future is going to change, and you're going to have a different set of core values, an evolved set of core values. Hopefully, yeah. Because hopefully we are continuing to grow and not just being stagnant, which entropy will take over and we'll just wither away and eventually die. So the idea is to keep moving, to move, like, in training too, like moving your muscles. Like you want to, if you don't use it, you lose it in a way. And that's kind of true with a lot of things. Losing yourself by not identifying who you are and like changing that by expanding new experiences and things of that nature. So I hope that people could understand that when they try to identify these values or these things in time right now, that they will change. It's just the direction, and that all of this is really leading towards directionality, trajectory, and not so much the destination, but that it's going to continue to change because, timeless wisdom tells us it's not the destination, it's the journey. And that's kind of true. It's not kind of, it's very true. Because there's always going to be another destination. A quote comes to mind from, was it Matthew McConaughey, when he was like one of his speeches, where he's not chasing anyone else, but he's always chasing himself like 10 years in the future. Like, what does that 10-year version ahead of me look like?
Ugh.
Right?
Ugh.
One more thing I want to say on that,
please,
if you don't mind, because I want to tie it into some of the technical aspect of it.
No,
of like with software, for example, you could think of versions of yourself like versions of software. Software has a release life cycle, semantic versioning or whatnot. So you might think of, an initial release of software to be version 1.0 or sub 1.0 or something like that. And then, as the software progresses and gets more features and becomes better, there's a version 2.0. And what I want people to start thinking about is, what does a version 2.0 of you look like? You could say that a version 1.0 of you might be like, well, I'm an adult now. I'm a functioning member of society. I could pay my taxes. I could have a decent relationship, and I have a job or something like that, or I have something. But my inner fulfillment may not be there, or I'm not really satisfied with the position I'm in my work, or I'm just kind of doing what other people are saying. I'm just trying to get by, and I'm not sure what to do next. So then with that framework, again, as a trajectory, not as a destination point, what does a trajectory from version 1.0 to 2.0 look like? If you had an evolved thinking, if new ways were opened up to you because you expanded your mindset, or if you believed in yourself a little bit more, or clearly identified who you were and acted in that knowledge, what would your life look like? Would it be better? Probably.
Probably.
So that trajectory, again, those points, those destinations, I want people, I hope, to think more about that. And again, those are the things that they could change. That's the things in their control, their thinking, their personal information, that they could affect themselves in the future and design who they are.
I also really like that you said that there's an internal, like, what does it look like? What does 2.0 look like? And maybe 2.0 right now for me is, I have the job, I have all these things I want, but my fulfillment isn't there. So it might not look any different, like to somebody just walking and look at me in the street. I might wear the same clothes and look the same, but inside of me,
it's personal. It's not compared to anyone else's version of 2.0 or something like that. It's very individual.
It is.
Yeah.
I like that a lot because it gives me the opportunity to I'm entirely living on the street, and this is 1.0 for me, and this is beta for me. I'm still in beta, and I just need to
early
release.
alpha test release,
and I just want to get out. And so like that could look very different from somebody else's 1.0, where maybe they had they went to school and they got their mat, they went to school, they did all these things,
right.
And they're like, oh shit, wait, I don't really know what I'm doing. Like, okay, we all started different places,
right?
But it's still almost it's pretty much the same journey, but it's not at the same time, which is weird to me. But there's such similarities of internal struggle or recognition of a struggle and desire to change.
Yeah, I think you hit something important there, which is it is kind of this there is similarities in the journey. It's just that the details aren't the same. Like the details of a person's life aren't repeatable, but the principles or the steps that they take are, like kind of follows along the lines of like the hero's journey or things that are told to us in story or, from ancient wisdom or that type of thing. Those things are repeatable. But they just look differently in the nuances and the details in everybody's life. And you can't get the same results as someone else can because you don't have the same starting hand. Like all the things that kind of make up who you are infinitely unique. Though we all have kind of, the same general physical body and brains and whatnot, those subtle differences make up a world of difference. And you just can't replicate that exact process.
I like not maybe one of the first conversations, but early on in our time together, it was talking. We talked about being a billionaire, becoming a billionaire, or I guess Elon Musk now becoming a trillionaire. Apparently, it's what is the true likelihood of even making $500 million?
Right.
What are the true chances of that reality happening? You probably got, 10, I don't really know. The percentage is obviously very, very small, but let's say you have 1% of people that make it into that like extreme wealth.
Yeah.
And a lot of it is just like, oh, oil was really good at that time.
Yeah.
Or tech really hit really well. And I just happened to be in tech at the right time. I met the right friends. And you very well could be as smart as that person or smarter than that person, maybe more connected, whatever, all these things.
Yep.
But just because it's not the right timing, it's just not going to happen. And so there's some degree of keep your head on a swivel to some degree. Like look at what the opportunities are presented in front of you. Like chasing tech maybe 20 years ago is different than chasing tech now. Maybe it's the same. I don't know. Or chasing Bitcoin 20 years ago is different than chasing it now. It's the same. There's just so much timing that's involved and so much uniqueness to the reality of those opportunities.
I think you said that very well. And it's not said enough. There's some people I think that are kind of drawing attention to that, but in the social media world and the internet, it's really easy to just point to outliers and be like, I did this. You can too with these 10 simple steps of how to become a billionaire in a year or whatever the fuck they're saying. That's just utterly ridiculous. But you're right, because it's like, it is timing. And the reality is that these large outlier successes, most of that was outside of their control. Timing of the market, timing of technology. Things weren't available at certain times that all of a sudden became available, and then you were at the right place and the right time to take advantage of that. You can't control that. You can't, wake up one day and be like, I'm going to position myself exactly at the right time to do this one thing that's going to change my life and everyone else's. That's not going to happen. And yet people tout that oh, look at Bezos, Elon Musk, and all these, billionaires or outliers that it's like, what do they do? What's their secret? What's their 20 things they do before 5 a.m. to wake up and maximize their life? I'm like, it doesn't matter. None of that matters. The only thing that matters is that Bezos got enough money to do Amazon early enough in the 90s before anyone else was doing it. You can't replicate that set of scenario. There's no way to replicate that. That's gone. And so to look for that scenario per se, yes, you can keep your head on the swivel, look for opportunities. Yes. But the focus, I think, is too much on the scale of success, which is outside of your control. What you can focus on is the depth of impact. How much am I connecting with you? How much am I helping this individual? How much value am I bringing by my service, by my business? You can control those things because you can put yourself into that. And then anything else that's outside of your control may happen, and you may catch, a win in your sales on this one thing that you couldn't control, and all of a sudden you're this crazy outlier too. But it's just no one really talks about that. There's one person I will say that in social media now that says a lot of it that I appreciate, which is Scott Galloway. Are you familiar with him?
I would have to see a face. I don't recognize the name.
He's wrote a couple books, Algebra of Happiness, Algebra of Wealth, I think. He's a guy in, I think he's 59 or 60. He's 20 years older than me or whatnot. But he openly admits of hey, I was born at the perfect time and in the right place, and all of the success and wealth that I have is like mostly out of my control. I worked hard and I wanted this wealth, but like I couldn't make it on my own. Like it happened because I caught investments in the market at the right time. I had, started a certain type of business at the right time. I was at the right schools at the right time. So timing, these big things that are outside our control, like they affect the scale of outcome, and we don't have control over that. And it's so much easier when you let go of the idea that you have to control the scale. I feel like so much better work can be done both like in yourself and for other people.
I think remembering that I am not in business for, like, to some degree, like, yes, I don't want to really necessarily work for somebody else. But at the end of the day, business is service. I'm providing a service.
Yes.
And I'm grateful for the opportunity to provide this service to people that find value in it, or that maybe like oftentimes like need it. And if I can impact 20 people, then that ripple effect is not just 20 people. Like it's
right.
a pretty large ripple effect. And so it scales on its own, but by focusing on the 20 people that I have, or the 5 people that I have, the first client that I have, you make a true effort, do some honest work, and you'll see success. And I think that I always like the gym for that reason. I'll say that I probably said this like on every single podcast for the last like 50 episodes, I swear to God, but it's taking something that you really, really work hard at, give it honest, true time and work, quality, care, and then months later you get to look back and say, wow, I did that.
Yeah.
I did all that work to accomplish this goal. That's fucking beautiful. And I think that's a lot of what business and life really is.
It is. It's such a powerful metaphor. I think it's worth saying in every podcast, to be honest. I'm a little biased, but
fair. I like it.
But well, to your point, like it's a strong metaphor for I think things that you do in life, in other areas like business, like your relationships, which is that continuous action over time stacks up to a critical mass that all of a sudden you then see that you can't just immediately recreate. So getting, to a certain physique or something like that, like you're saying, takes months of dedication and work and intentionality. And then you get to look at that and it's there. And it emanates from you, and it shapes you in a different way. It shapes your biology in a different way. And then if you don't go to the gym tomorrow, the next day it's still there. Like you just got to maintain like this new threshold or critical mass that you've created. And that's easier than trying to get to that point in the first place. But to get to that point in the first place takes that amount of time and effort and intentionality. And I think that's hard for people to understand, because we're wired in circadian rhythms. We're wired to think about things in terms of a day. We experience a day, a night and a day, and we sleep and then we get up and repeat. But we don't see the individual effects of that in the moment. We see, all of a sudden we notice them stacked up. And so it's hard for us to visualize things like exponential growth, or the effects of like lifting or training for months. But then when you do see it, it's powerful. And that, I think, shapes your outlook on other things. I think there's a misnomer with people that go to the gym a lot, that there are perhaps meatheads or people that are just aggressive or something like that. I think a lot of them actually are people that want to shape themselves to be better and have that reflect in other areas of their life as well. At least I do. So maybe that's not the case, but a lot of the people that, I've seen of your clients and like other people that I've talked to as well have a similar mindset. It's like a good filter, I think, for quality of people in a way. Like,
I think so.
It's a great measure. I don't know.
think so.
Yeah.
When I first got before I got into powerlifting, I was around a bunch of people. Obviously, I'm still in high school, but I thought of myself as a meathead because I was the only one that was interested in like anatomy and physiology, and I was like this weird cat that was just interested in like how your muscle works, and this is your bicep, and this is your it's like fair, kind of basic, but then like towards the end, I started getting a little bit more like much more in depth. And then I got to my undergrad, and then I got specified inside of this area. So I was surrounded by other people that had been had at least interest in sport. And I was like, oh shit, I've been studying this for like 3 years. And now I'm just seeing it for the first time my junior year in college. Like,
Wow.
what the fuck? Like I hit this in sophomore year of high school. Like, what are y'all doing? And so I realized that from that specific one thing that there's this not just being a meathead. This is a real knowledge. You can really go off and do a lot of things with this thing. But then I also, when I was working on the powerlifting team, everyone around me was like, oh, that guy's getting his PhD in aerospace physiology or aerospace engineering. You have those guys who are petroleum engineers, chemical engineers. You have all these computer guys, all these really very intelligent individuals. And then you go to the world team and all of these guys are also so intelligent. You're like, what the fuck? Like, the people at the highest level are some of the kindest people, and also some of the oddly most aggressive on the platform. And then they're the kindest people off the platform.
Yeah.
And then so intelligent, so introspective, so much wisdom, so much care. It was a hell of an eye opener. I was like, oh, this is kind of like the people that go to the gym. Like, people that really, really dive into this and live this lifestyle they care about themselves and getting better and learning and being a really what is the word? Part of society. What's it? Whatever. They want to a good citizen in
they want
their
to contribute.
They want to be a contributed citizen in their community, and I love that.
That's incredible. I think more people should be aware of that, and maybe use that as a point of encouragement, and not so much as a thing like, oh, well, they've been doing that for years, I can never do that. It's not a measuring of you compared to where they are. They've had a different starting position. They've had different life circumstances. The idea that you have to be at a certain place to start, I think, is a misnomer and a limiting belief, in that you should start wherever you're at. And I think part of personal growth, honestly, I think can be reflected in your ability to develop yourself physically, because I feel like those things kind of go hand in hand.
I think so.
Yeah.
There's a lot of moments where I'm just talking to myself. A lot of self-encouragement in the gym. A lot of moments of I had a really cool experience where I was about to go into a jerk the other day. So I'm trying to jerk 315 over my head. And so I put it on my chest, and as soon as I felt it, I immediately had an internal dialogue that said, you can't do this. And then I had an immediate switch to say, I don't know, it feels like it happened in just a moment, less than a second. I had a switch of, hey, no, you got this. It'll be okay. Just drip, dip, drive. You got it. It'll be okay. And I missed it. And so I was like, fuck, okay, well, my internal dialogue wasn't already prepared by the time I got up there. Let me try this again. So I reattempted with hey, you got this. We're going to do it. Stop thinking, just execute. And got up there, and then was able to execute pretty well. And then I'm not able to hold at the very top yet. It was a hell of a PR. So 50 pounds from the last week.
That's
so
incredible.
It was kind of wild.
That's really,
wow. But it was just I think it was a moment that I took away from the gym. It was how I talk to myself really does make a difference in how I perform. And so whenever I go into the next meeting, the next podcast, the next training session, everything that I'm talking to myself about is going to ultimately reflect onto what's going on there.
That's absolutely true, man. Self-talk is paramount. And if you're not actively doing it, I think it's something that is worth taking the time to try and experiment, actively adjusting your self-talk in different situations. Because if you're not actively doing it, you are kind of doing it subconsciously. You just might not realize it. And those words have a lot of power to your subconscious and your programming. And if you're constantly telling yourself, oh, I can't do it, or I'm not good enough, or whatnot, again, going back to the core limiting beliefs, those are already kind of hardwired into you in your programming. And if you're not changing that with some kind of self-talk or journaling or writing it down to reprogram that wiring, that will hold you down. Your body will kind of go into a self-preservation mode because what it's trying to do is trying to make sure you could survive, because you're telling yourself that you can't do it. So it wants to make sure you're okay. It's going to conserve energy. It's going to do all these things kind of against what you kind of really want in order to preserve you. But if you rewire that thinking and that self-talk to be like, I can do this, or, I am good enough, or whatever that programming that is that you have. If you're able to reframe it and rephrase it in a positive statement, it has a powerful effect. Think about like visualization and the self-talk since we're talking about weightlifters, we'll continue with other athletes, but that's what Olympians do. That's what, the top athletes do. They visualize and talk to themselves in a way that does the movement or does the thing in their mind before they actually go and do it. And then when they go do it, they're able to replicate it. I don't have the studies or the exact things in science that point to it, but there are studies that I've read that talk about the power of visualization of actions and how that when you visualize an action and then actually do the action, you're more likely to succeed in that substantially. So there's definitely power in self-talk. And it's kind of like voodoo in a way, it feels like. Because I know there's an element
Almost.
where, because you can go back, there's like the other woo-woo side of it of like positive affirmations where all you're doing is just like saying things, but you're not taking any action.
Yeah.
That I think, I could see where I would hesitate on that. I think the important part is the combination of its continual reprogramming of your self-talk, of your visualization, and then stepping in and acting in that. And then it creates a kind of gravity around you, in my experience, where, people will use the phrase, the universe conspires, to help you once you start taking action. That's kind of a way to put it because you kind of create this gravity or attraction around it because you're transmitting things subconsciously that are being picked up by other people that they don't even know is being picked up, that you're picking up too, that you don't even know is being picked up. And then when you start manifesting that by like stepping into those actions, it creates this otherworldly gravity that you can't quite explain, but is definitely there. And you could point to the effects of it. And I've experienced it. I know you have. And it's a thing where it's worth taking a chance just experimenting with it if you haven't yet, just to see the results for yourself, because there is something to it.
It does sound like such woo-woo shit.
It does.
And
it's that stuff. I've had issues with that before too, especially for my, upbringing and whatnot. Like I have these internal conflicts of like, oh, I don't know. Is that, am I just kind of being too ethereal, too woo-woo about it? But there's something there that we can't fully comprehend.
There is.
And it's there.
Then it's research-based. And I, at a very early age, I was told, as much as I can say, obviously I said there's maybe not so great things about my father. There's some good things about him.
Of course.
In that he taught me visualization. And at a very young age, like 5, 6, 7 years old, when I first started going to the gym, he was like, hey, just imagine, just picture it over and over and over and over again.
He taught you that?
Uh-huh.
At 5 or at a young age like that?
Very young age.
Dude.
Like very young age. That's when I first started going to the gym, was about 5 years old.
That's
5,
incredible.
6 years old.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. So I've been in the gym.
I feel like you're just glazing over that fact. Like that, most people aren't taught that. Like at such an age. At least I haven't, and most people I know aren't. But that's powerful, man.
And
wow.
The way that he talked about that for years and years.
Yeah.
And later on in my life, the way he would talk about it was like, well, whenever he was in SWAT, and a sniper, and so he was like, the way that I envision taking the shot. I envision breaking down the door. I envision, and I'll replay it over and over and over again. Check all the doors, make sure everything's good, because every single time I'm risking my life.
Yeah.
And so there's no difference with anything that you do in your personal life. You can always just visualize. Even if it's something as simple as like writing a paper, I would use it for, like, I'm writing a paper in high school and like, I just want to make sure that I'm doing this appropriately. I want to do it beforehand. What am I going to write about? This is how I'm going to write it. And then all of a sudden you get to the paper and there's like no writer's block. And so if you're a writer, like just practicing what is my time going to look like? And it doesn't need to be like in the specifics of what I'm writing, but like from an outside view, I'm looking at myself writing and I can see, oh, I'm going to take a break here, maybe take a sip of water. I'm going to have these things set up in this way. And then you do all those things and you sit there and then you can find this flow state so quickly, beautifully. It is a really cool tool. And I'm also I grew up Catholic, and I was like, I don't really know if I like this very much. I don't know. Like, I don't know how much of this stuff I believe. Like, are we just looking for things, or is this real? But then I really saw a significant difference with visualization. I visualized myself competing for Team USA. 3 years later, I'm competing for Team USA.
That's powerful, man.
I'm sorry, but I think it works.
I think so too. Yeah.
Yeah.
You were talking about like getting in flow state and like writer's block. Visualization is definitely powerful and kind of like unblocking yourself in that way. And then also thinking about that, if you're trying to get into a flow state or you're having writer's block, I forgot which author actually said it, but it's the idea that there really isn't actually writer's block. It's you trying to control the outcome because you want it to be perfect before you put anything down. There's nothing stopping you from writing down some words. Like just start writing morning pages even, or whatever it is. It's an element of control. And especially for creative people, I could really empathize with that because we want to have it perfect, or we want to create this, really great piece of work. And it's this fallacy that we believe every step of the way has to show that it's already perfect in a way, where it's never going to be perfect. And it's more about getting something good down on paper or captured in audio or video or whatever you're creating, and continuing that process and, putting in the effort and showing up and doing it over and over and again, and then visualizing yourself doing it again and again. And yeah, man, I could really attest to that. I had to use visualization really in kind of forming things like around self-engineer, like talking about what it is for people, or visualizing like how I want to affect people or what I want to communicate. Because like doing this, for example, is outside my box. Like I've done various forms of this in the past, but these are more new things for me, and I enjoy them actually. Once I've started to visualize and put myself in that place and think about the outcome more and think about what I want to have happen in the future because of that, or how I visualize the future. And the visualization is very powerful. And just double down on that because I really agree with it.
I like it a lot. I think it takes a lot to do something that, I don't know, at the very beginning you're like, we'll get there. Like I want to, like, yes, maybe in the future. And I think at that point inside of Ben, I had fucked up on so many podcasts, like even just recordings or wrong audio or wrong video or video cuts out or whatever the fuck. Yeah. And I'm like, hey dude, like let's just come in and let's just try it. Yeah. Like if it works out, then great. And if it not, then we don't have to worry about it. But I think that you're right, that the other person needs to be ready for that. And if you're not ready and you can be presented an opportunity, and if you're just inside of you, it's just not there, then it's just not there. And sometimes that's okay. I think sometimes we also postpone something so long. Like it can take somebody 5, 10, 15 years to finally say, I'm going to do that thing. Yeah. And you're like I'm so happy that you did it. And that timeline that you took, like that's what you needed. Mm-hmm. But along that process, there were probably so many opportunities of people saying, hey, like, I can do that for you, or like, let's help over here, let's collaborate over here, or if you would have just gotten started when you initially wanted to get started, that you would have been 15 years ahead now. And 15 years is a fuck ton of time, man.
That's a lot of time.
That's a lot of time. And I don't know, I think that's what's cool about life, but at the same time, I think when you see other people like go through that, like kind of step, you're like, oh, like I just want to help. Like I just really want to help. Like if you just did, like, can you just move your foot out just a little bit and like it'll save your hips like for the rest of your life? Yeah. Like I promise. And like when you're in a position to offer that information, it's almost a responsibility. Like I take it. I can
understand that feeling a lot.
It's crazy
because that 15-year gap from knowing what you should do in action again, that's a lot of time. And the thing I think that I've realized is that, it's taken me a long time to take certain actions and to realize certain things. And the one thing that I want to do is save people time. And I think you kind of want to do that too. And I think that's the one of the major values of having like a mentor or a coach or being in an apprenticeship or something along those lines where you invest in guidance is that it saves you so much time, because you have that objective observation and feedback that you can't get just, trying to figure it out on your own. Now, you should continue to figure things out on your own. But if you want to speed up the results, or if you want to speed up to maybe avoiding things that, they're lessons learned, but you don't have to learn every lesson personally. There's some lessons you could learn through books or stories or guidance or mentorship. And those ones, I think, are worth learning that shortcut way. Some lessons you kind of just have to learn on your own, and that's part of it. But that time savings, I think, is one of the most important things, because we can't get that back. Now, if you're someone kind of almost like me, it's had a long time between, perhaps certain actions and then, the things that that you want to do, or maybe even you didn't know, but realizing finally, feeling like you have alignment in your life. There's a gift in that too, because now you have experience in a way that someone else doesn't have, and you could save someone else time.
100%.
And so, in a way, when I think a part of why I'm, doing these type of things now is because I can't go back and save Mario time, but I can save someone else's time. And that's incredibly valuable. And I feel like that's important.
Massively.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, how many times was I really coached or trained on a job? Ever? Never? Outside
a lot
of
it's just here, go figure it out.
Yeah.
That's a lot of life too, which is difficult.
It is. It makes it so hard, but and then I think that's where listening to you, and there's for whatever it just, that was what glared at me. How many times have I really gotten true mentorship? I take a role, and I'm like, oh man, my manager, my boss, or the owner, they're going to be my mentor. They're going to really help me make sure I figure this out. And then there's just so much going on inside the business sometimes or they're just the personality where that's just not within them, or they don't have time for it, they're stressed, whatever it may be.
Yeah.
That you don't get that, and you're forced to figure it out alone, and you're forced to fuck up so much on the job and then get chewed out, and then what you're like, fuck, am I gonna lose my job? And you have this overwhelming this stress that just sits over you, and just having somebody who's on the outside is just like, hey, I've worked in software, or I've worked in this industry, let's talk about it a little bit. How can we navigate these issues? Maybe you go talk to this person instead. Don't go to that department. They usually take a long time. Let's just try this department here. Little things like that can ultimately save that person so much time and stress. Yeah. So much stress.
This is so the way that I think the modern world works right now is not the way that it used to be in terms of learning or jobs or trades. It used to be apprenticeships. It used to be you did have a mentor. It used to be if you were learning a skill, you served under someone for 7 years until you got that skill down pat. And then you were serving in their shop or whatever they did. And then you went out and you branched on your own. But you had all this guidance and mentorship to what you're doing. Now, you might get that in some things, if you're going to school to be a doctor or whatnot, I maybe there's a little bit more of that. I'm not sure. I'm not a doctor. But I will say that it is missing in the way that the world works with careers and jobs right now. It's a byproduct of the industrial age, which was how can we mass bring people into some kind of complicit state, enough education that they could be a functioning member of society, and then work a job and kind of plow them through like a factory to work in a factory or to do, blue collar work or white collar work now, or, it's missing that element of mentorship. You might get that in a classroom a little bit or taking a course a little bit, but the one-on-one stuff is missing, and it's kind of vital to how we are as humans. And couple that with things of the nature of a lot of people don't have a strong father figure in their life, or, they might have parts of that, but they don't have those role models that help develop who you are and save you time and kind of teach you things that would probably be better if you learned with some guidance instead of just, figuring it out yourself. Again, saving you time. But it's missing. I'm saying all that to say that it's missing, and I think it produces a lot of lost people and people that feel uncertain, and they're like, I don't know what the hell to do right now because everything's kind of changing, and I don't have anyone specific to guide me, and influencers and gurus are telling me to buy their course and do this one thing, and I'll change my life and also make 100 million a year or whatever ridiculous figure that happens. And then we're all preyed upon this. The people that have the outsized windfalls or the early wins or the right timing get to prey upon the people who don't, because we're all kind of swimming around and looking like, well, okay, well, what does all this mean? And it's easy to be attracted towards shortcuts because we want that win. We want that security or certainty of a clear path. When the reality is, it's actually a very unclear path, and you just need some guidance along the way.
I think that the school system has done a really bad job of doing, I think what mentorship was supposed to be, or like some sort of an apprenticeship was kind of supposed to be, like, we're going to expose you to all this information and then here's how to apply it. And then like, go out, like, let's practice here inside of this safe environment. And then like, we already have established football teams or, whatever, like sport teams inside here, or we already have government roles inside of our facility that's helping with DOJ for Department of for like the architecture team, or like I can incorporate all these different people that's kind of like leading the charge and ultimately doing something good for the greater good, whatever. But it's just like, here, like come sit in class, take your test, and go home. Like, you're just trying to fucking get people out.
That's it, man. Like it. Now, I will say that school teachers I highly respect, and they have one of the hardest jobs in the world, and we need better support for them, because we need a better infrastructure for them to actually do their job right.
Yeah.
I will say though that the system itself is set up so that people could just learn how to take tests and fit in roles, not learn about themselves or learn about how life really works or what opportunities are, or how to network, or like the things that I think really kind of matter in life and that you hopefully learn eventually, but you don't really learn that in school. It's kind of like a bubble, and then you get out and it's like, oh, this is the real world, and I'm only vaguely set up for it, if at all.
I think that having apprenticeships almost offers some greater respect for the roles that you're also taking, and so they're like, you're probably more likely to stay in that position for a longer time. Really like care for the thing that you're doing and you're like putting out into the world, not just another. We went to the store the other day, and I know we went to go pick up like some baby gifts for a baby shower, and it was this lady at the front scanning the stuff, and we were like, hey, you don't have to put that in a bag. She scanned it, put it in a bag, scan it. And I was like, I guess she said, nah, I'm going to put it in a bag for you. And I was talking to, and she was like, huh?
It's on autopilot.
It's like, damn, dude, like, you're not even here. And I think that people get so lost or so tired or just so bored of their current just other thing to pay their bill, that there's no clarity, there's no guidance. It's just, and it doesn't just happen at the cashier level, right? It happens at every level where people are just existing just to exist, and they're just like, I guess I just gonna click clack, and then it's 5 o'clock and I'm out. It's I don't know, it's a weird reality to live in.
It is, man. A lot of people are on autopilot, and I hope that it's not so much about being woke or something like that, because there are certain phrases that I feel like are just way overused, and they have a bad taste in my mouth now, like best self. I'm like, there's no fucking best self. You're not one or the other. There's better selves. You know what I mean? Like, that's a very toxic way of thinking. You evolve, things change, there's nuance. But anyway, a lot of people have this kind of automatic programming. In a way, I think it's to help just deal with the situation too, because what else can you do sometimes if you feel powerless, except just kind of like go with it and then wait to clock out and then scroll, because that's your one relief, or play video games for until you go to sleep, because at least you're alleviating the pain. You could escape for a little bit, and that's something you can control as well. I say all that because I've experienced that before, and I empathize with that. Like, that's a hard place to be. And I do think that, again, going back to the guidance, like having someone there that, even if it's just, a trusted friend that you just open up more to, even that's enough to get started and to be like, okay, there's some things I could change about my life. I'm going to make those changes. and then make forward progression towards a decision I've made and not just allowing my life to be on autopilot.
I think that almost makes me a little emotional. I think just having...
It's hard.
Oh.
I want... So I guess an emotional realization that I had, I think, in my own journey, in seeing like what I've gone through and like the things that I've tried to change. And there's, I think the realization is that, and I've done this, is that people try to change things incrementally that need to be changed fundamentally. And they try to just change like that little one thing at a time. Or if you're stuck in a bad job under a bad manager, you can, deliver a little bit more, do things of that nature, but it's not going to get you out of that poisonous situation. What's going to get you out of the poisonous situation is leaving and finding, a different course. But that is really hard. And that's just one asset or facet of how that might manifest in your life. But the reason why it's so hard is because it often takes going backwards first. And we're so averse to loss. It's like, I don't know how many times stronger than any gain. Fear of loss is like massively, psychological bias that is meant to protect us, but ultimately hurts us now in modern society. So we're afraid to lose what we have, even if it's shitty, even if it's not working for us. At least it's certain, and you could expect, the toxic relationship or the bad job or the unfortunate situation that you're in and not doing anything about. Because at least you can count that will be there and you have that certainty. And that's something you can control. I know that I could just be in my bubble here and that's fine. It's uncertain and scary to be like, no, I need to change the situation. And that might mean I might have to sleep on a friend's couch for a couple months or something like that. Or I might have to, go paycheck to paycheck or have no paycheck and use up all my savings while I find this next job. But if I stay in this thing, I'm just going to, I feel like I'm dying. Like it's really hard, and it's hard to go backwards. And I say that with empathy because it was hard for me to go backwards, and I had to. I went very backwards for a while. I had to dig myself out of a very deep hole. But I'm glad I did, and it was totally worth it.
I dug myself out just moving here, and I've been still digging myself out, and it's hard.
It is, man.
But now today I can sit here and say like, okay, this is why I moved. Yeah. And there was a lot of people saying, don't go, don't leave the Las Vegas. It's going to be a terrible place. It's really hard to create community. Everybody there just sucks. And I was driving. Yeah, dude, it was wild. Wow. And then I drove up here. I had specific people that had lived here in the past that had been saying these things to me. I was driving up here. I stopped in a city outside of Texas. He was like, where are you going? I was like, I'm moving to Vegas. And he was like, ugh, don't want to do that. I was like, holy shit, am I making the right decision? It really got to me inside my head. Am I really making a bad decision here? Am I really going to find bad, all these things to be true? And then I moved here and I was immediately met with a lot of open arms. And I was has it been weird at some extent, instances where I thought I had friends and I didn't? Yeah, sure. But that's kind of fucking anywhere, man. That's kind of it. And so I thought at one point, I got to remember who's telling me these things. What is the character of those people?
Exactly.
Who were they meeting and being? That's their reality, because that's probably who they were at that time in their life when they lived here. They probably weren't very communicative. They probably weren't very community oriented. And so they were probably out drinking, hanging out, fucking around. Yeah, it was hard to connect with people.
They're also coloring your decisions with their reality. Isn't it funny that it's when you're about to make a hard change or do something difficult or do something that might lead to some kind of positive change, a lot of people around you, even people that you might call friends, will try to hold you back.
Why?
Because as humans, we're referential beings and we can't help but compare. I do that. I mean, everybody does that to some degree, but if someone has a big win or success, most people honestly compare back to themselves well, why not? Why didn't I get that? Or how come I can't get that? It's, I think more of the evolved individuals that support the people that make those achievements, and actually celebrate them and don't feel threatened by them. So when you move to Vegas from Texas and you have all the people in your hometown that are telling you don't go, people are awful over there. A lot of that is just their reflection on subconsciously not wanting to see someone that they know do something that they want and then succeed, because then that means, well, I'm not doing it for myself. Why not? You kind of can't help but put yourself in that position then and think, now I have to look and visualize at myself and be like, oh, you start to question your own life in a way, your own decisions. And so that's a signal of itself. It's like, well, if you're feeling that, it's probably because you're unsatisfied in your life right now, or you're living in quiet desperation or low-lying panic and just not dealing with it. And so when someone signals that they're changing, it makes you feel that stronger.
I'm sure that I've felt it in the past, but I can't. I'm thinking kind of as you're talking. This is probably not active listening very necessarily. So I apologize.
That's fine.
But I'm like, have I done that in the past? Like I'm sure that I have, but I don't, like, nothing like really resonates really heavy for me. But I'm sure that there's been moments in the past where I've thought that. I think probably more with success, but even then I thought success was like, oh, you make money by being a shitty person. Like, or only people who are super wealthy are doing shady shit. Like, they're doing the shadiest of stuff. But I just didn't know anybody. It was so far away from, home or reality. Like, it was close to home, I guess. Like, it's like grandfather, like family, like fairly well off.
Mm-hmm.
But I didn't really understand the intricacies of what was going on. And then so when I started seeing that outside of other people, I was like, well, that guy's probably, that government official or that other person's probably doing Elon. Like, I probably would have thought 20 years ago, Elon Musk is just like bought by the Illuminati and he's selling like kids, and like that would have been my thought process. Versus now it's definitely like, he's probably just working harder than probably most people are. I don't know. Like got lucky and working hard. That's about it. Like, that's about, yeah.
Yeah. Not to turn this into Elon topic, but he's definitely an anomaly. Like,
yeah.
What he has first business at like 12 or something like that. His first business, I don't know, part of the PayPal mafia. Like, he's had a string of successes that can never be replicated.
Again, just super lucky, right? Super lucky. And like, you have to have a personality, I think, that also fits that. Don't get me wrong. You have to be the person that's going to be like, at 12 o'clock, I'm still going to go to work. Or it's midnight and I'm still at work. Like, that's kind of what it takes sometimes. Is it all the time? No. There's a balance to like living a healthy lifestyle, and like, do you really want to be a trillionaire? Like, is that really what you want, or you just want to be financially okay?
Right.
Like, that's probably more the reality of what you want. Like, do you know what $500,000 a year feels like?
Right.
Probably not. So then probably like, let's start there. How about we start there and let's figure out, is that enough? Because it probably is.
Yeah, I think you're right. It's your mind expands to new experiences, but until you've reached that level, you kind of don't know what that thinking is yet. And we often think we need more than we actually do. I think where in reality, it's more about having enough so you don't have to worry, and you can focus on what's most important in your life. Be that your work, your business, your practice, your relationships, your family. I think that is a healthy thing. Now, we need people like Elon. We need outliers that are married to their work, and that's what they do, because it does push forward innovation in a way that no one else can. But those are rare individuals that I think also have to take like a certain kind of makeup and wiring that's probably not replicatable. It's just that's who they are. They've been built that way, and then they had the right circumstances and timing to facilitate that. And that's not something I think you could just choose. I think you just are. And when you are, I hope you identify it, because it'll benefit everyone else.
I think that you need him just as much as you need the opposite end of the spectrum, the person that's going to continue to work or be homeless. Like, you need both people for this like whole like reality to continue to exist and like push forward at an appropriate rate that isn't like, is not unsustainable, but then like you have to attack these problems over here and like attack other maybe problems that people are like, that's so far away from like reality. Like, how about we just focus on like the homeless? And it's like, well, that's needed and that's needed. Like these two things are like part of our whole growth and like homeostasis as a entire society. Like you can't just disregard one for the other and say, well, that one's more important than that one is. Is it? Like, like maybe there's an order to do these things in. I don't know that. And it depends on the list of problems. But you need both sets of people. You need these people, everybody.
Yeah.
A range of people.
Yeah. And thankfully, we live in a country or a world that facilitates those options. You could choose to go down that path to be that type of person. Or, we have kind of a set of cultural guidelines, or I guess another way to put it is sustainable societal fallacies, which are, these are the traditional pathways that have been set up in, our American democracy or society, in that, you could follow a typical path of, I go to school, I try to go to college, I graduate, try to get a job, which is not the same anymore. That worked, 10, 15 years ago, not so much anymore, but
maybe 10, 15 years
maybe,
ago.
I don't know, maybe even not even that early. But
kind of depends on the major.
Yeah, it does. But anyways, it's the idea that there's these predetermined pathways that you could just kind of like tap into and follow. And in a way, I say sustainable fallacies because they're not absolute truths, but what they do is they do set up a framework of society where it's like, okay, people are producing families, people are working jobs that facilitate great experiences, like being able to go to the restaurant or be able to go to the store. And we have these things in a way to exchange where we're not bartering, but we have these, pathways that you could take kind of just by default, and you can kind of pick one. Or you can disregard all those and kind of find your own path. I think, which is what a lot of entrepreneurs try to do, or innovators or people that want to showcase a different way of living, which is also viable. So both are needed in a way because one provides the framework for the other to innovate. One has more certainty, the other one is uncertain, and there's more risk, but with more risk comes more reward. So you kind of have to decide. Yeah, I think if, again, going back to self-honesty, you have to be really honest with yourself. It's like, maybe I really just want to establish myself in a particular type of community and live just in a very predictable manner. And there's a lot of value in that because I could be in this community, ingrained in it, contributed to it, and that's where I'm at. Another option might be I'm more of a traveler or more of an entrepreneur, and I have a lot of uncertainty, and I'm kind of really more dedicated to my work. But that sets up a business or a thing that affects a lot of other people and brings value in a way that couldn't be done if I just stayed in one location or followed a more traditional path. So I don't think there's a wrong way. I think it's just being aligned with what's true to you and finding that out.
Beautifully said.
Thank you, my friend.
Beautifully said. I don't think that's talked about enough.
I don't think so either.
I think that there's this idea that I'm going to be an entrepreneur and I get to set my own schedule.
You're setting yourself up for a bad job. A worse job. It's so much more than just like, again, man, it's like a fucking social media thing of like people like, oh, you too could do this thing and like, 100 million a month just by following this like easy 2-step course and also buying all these businesses and doing all these things. Just follow my simple, steps that I did. It's not repeatable and it might not be you. Yeah. And so you have to like filter out those external influences and be like, what is really me? What really aligns with me? That's true. That's good. I don't have to be what other people are saying.
I don't really like other people's rules.
I don't either, to be honest.
So I've been an employee multiple times. Has not worked out well for me. I am not a good employee. I have learned that time and time again. I am not a good employee. I can do really good work. I will be very efficient. I will hit numbers beyond what you expected me. I can adapt to any situation that I'm put in, but it's going to be my way. And as an owner of a company, you're not going to like that, even though the numbers are good. Yeah. And so like, because it's your baby, like you want to have a sense of control over your business. Yeah. And I get that. Some people have maybe an ego that's a little bit more, fallible, I guess, if you will. I don't know if that's the word, that's the word that I really want. Sensitive, not even sensitive is not the word I want. But in that,
I get what you're saying.
Yeah. there's a word that I really want that is just not coming. That just wants overall control over the situation and wants it their way for a certain, and there are certain reasons for it, and I get it. But if I can find a flaw in that reason, that I'm going to find the flaw and I'm going to go another direction.
Yeah, because you're more about bringing value and execution in a way that you could see clearly, rather than them wanting a particular process because they feel comfortable because it's their baby or their business.
Correct.
Yeah,
and that's not very comfortable for a lot of people.
No, for a lot of people, it's not, because in business. My understanding too is like once you have certainty or a process, you want to kind of keep it because then you can predict and then you have something that you could maintain over time. So yeah, it makes sense that for some that might be hard to wrap their head around.
And I don't know, I try to put myself in that position. And if I brought a trainer in to do another piece of it, it does worry me to some degree. Like what is that training going to look like? But at the same time, it's, other people are professionals as well. And so long as I choose a professional that I enjoy and I don't have to stick with that person forever, then let them cook, if you will. Let them do their thing. Like, they're good at their job for a reason. Like, they've done this research, they've done whatever they need to do. Like, offering some, like, all right, this is the way you do it. Cool. Let me follow it for a while. And I like it, and I don't understand, like, this doesn't make any practical sense. Like, why are we doing these things? Like, it's just something I don't know. Like show me the research or show me the reason why we're doing these things a specific way. I'd be happy to be educated. But if it's just, I don't know, just liked it, then, well, I don't know. Then probably going to have to switch gears a little bit.
Yeah. It makes sense, that thinking. It reminds me of, I think there was a book that I read recently, or was it last year? I forgot the name of the author, but the book is, I think, Buy Back Your Time. And there's a quote that I'm going to paraphrase that stuck with me, which was essentially 80% done by someone else is awesome. Like, they're never going to get 100%, but if they can get 80% and it's someone else that's doing it, that's incredible, because then that frees you up to, in the business sense, to work on the business instead of in the business. So it's a trap to strive for perfect replication, I think, by someone else. And I've been in scenarios too where it's like I've had people that have worked under me or have done work for me, and I've tried to adopt that mindset, because I think as someone who tries to do quality work, which I would say is just about every business owner, is that they probably want to do something well. There is that hesitation to let someone else do something that you've refined or kind of like got down pat, and then you hand it off to someone else. There is that, like, oh, but I want to control it, or, oh, I want to make sure you're doing this just right. And you have to kind of let that go. Otherwise, again, an element of control. You can't control them. They could act based on the instructions given. You can control the instructions you're giving them, but they have to act on their own. You have to trust them. Yeah, so you have to have that type of dynamic.
You did tell me that. I like it. 80% rule.
Yeah.
Yeah. It
was helpful for me.
It's a nice rule. I don't know how long we've gone. I feel like I could talk to you forever.
Yeah.
Let's.
Oh wow.
How long have we gone?
It was almost 6 o'clock. 5:45.
Nice. Cool.
Probably like an hour and a half.
Hour and a half. Yeah, it's pretty good. Couple more things and we'll call it a day.
Sure.
How has Mario changed over the last 10 years?
That is a great question. So, Mario, let's see. I would say that in general, I've been okay with not making, I've been better about not making myself small. And what I mean by that is that I would be adverse to being assertive or speaking my mind or confronting a situation that would lead to some kind of conflict, because I wanted to be nice, or I wanted people to like me. And so going back to the self-dishonesty thing, I would adjust my behavior or compromise certain parts of myself, my thinking, that would allow for me to navigate that in a way that I would avoid a conflict, or I would avoid a hard thing that I have to face. And that stacked up over time, to manifest in ways that led to me getting a divorce, me getting into a lot of debt, and then having to dig myself out of that. And the thing that changed was that I stopped compressing myself and started going towards the things that I know I needed to do. And that's my definition of not making myself small anymore. I've expanded. And I think that's the biggest change, because it is a completely different approach on how I live and how I think. And it has just completely changed my life in that way. I don't think I would, now, I wouldn't say that I wouldn't completely unrecognize myself, because I think people who know me would say there are elements of me that are very much still the same. But inside, I would not recognize myself. Like I literally, it's different. It's like a completely different world in there.
It's powerful.
It is. It's hard for me to even describe, and that's why I kind of like stutter with it a little bit, because sometimes certain changes are hard to put into words. So I'm trying to learn how to put it into better words, but that's like, it's a completely different internal wiring, and willingness to kind of like act in that too, and not just say like, oh, I did this one thing and that's it. It's not one and done. It's a daily thing now. So
again, something that makes me oddly emotional, because I think
it's true. Maybe that's why
it resonates so well.
There's one thing that I have learned too is different, is that so much transmits beyond the words, like what we're saying. Like when I'm talking to you about this, like I'm talking from my gut, like it's coming forward in a way that maybe someone who's listening to this or watching this can see a little bit of it. I think some of it will come through, but I'm sure it's different being in the room with me and hear me say it, because it's real. And it's speaking in communication with intention and without fear of being judged, and just being honest and being here, whatever that shows up as.
I think as someone who watches, like visually, I watch a lot of podcasts. There have been so many that I've saved, that I've clipped, that I've like just screen recorded, because they elicited an emotion. And so I don't think that it's, I'm sure it's to some degree different, but I don't know. I think it's still rather powerful, to the point where I save things still to this day where I'm just like, oh my God, like I can't believe, like I'm going to replay that and replay that and replay that. Like the way that they said that, the way that it came out, I don't know, there's something about it that just hits so hard, that I want to own that.
Yeah.
And so I think that, sure, it might be different for some people, but I think a lot of people will ultimately like hear and feel the words that you're saying, because I don't know. I mean, I do. And it's just, I think, especially when I go back and edit, like I'll look at it and be like, oh shit, it'll bring me back to that same emotion. And so like, that gives me some reassurance that other people that are watching are also having that same opportunity to have that emotion if they're in the right place. It resonates, because I think that if I look at myself today, in comparison to who I was 6 months ago, 2 years ago, I mean, it's an entirely different human. And I think
you've evolved.
I've evolved. And in 5 years, I think that evolution will be much more loud. I can like, oh shit, like 7 years ago, I was a real mess, versus now this is an entirely different human, but I can even recognize it just in this moment today. So I think that's why it's so powerful.
I love that that's resonating with you, by the way.
Yeah.
And I love it. I could say, just to kind of confirm your description of that, you're a different Ben than when I first met you, like a better Ben, like an evolved version of Ben. Like you've grown, you've made some really difficult and important decisions recently, and you've committed yourself to your practice. And I love that. It's inspiring to me, honestly, because you've, over the time we've been training together, again, not just the physical growth that I've been able to accomplish under your tutelage, but the things that you brought out of me by your asking questions, being vulnerable, sharing your story has impacted me. And it's really helped me too. But I could see your evolution, like in who you are now. It's evident. So all that just to say, like, Yeah, it's true.
Thanks.
And it's emotional for me too, because I know we should go have a cry party now, but I'm just saying that the reason why there's emotion there is because it's real, and we want authenticity, and we want to connect. And what you're doing here is authentically connecting with people. And what I've tried to communicate here is an authentic connection, and you're receiving that. And so it's awesome that you're feeling that. Yeah. It's affirming. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, man.
Last thing, I'm going to go sorry, I always do this, and I'm sorry for everybody. 2 more things. One question and then one final. What advice would you have given 15-year-old Mario?
Oh, wow. 15-year-old Mario.
Or 21-year-old Mario.
Yeah. Double down on your curiosity. I'm going to steal what Jazz said too, because she said it in the last podcast, but don't take things so seriously. Lighten up a little bit. I definitely took things too seriously. And it wasn't that I'm not saying value things less. I'm saying don't try to control it. Because I think that's where that seriousness comes from, because it's like, I got to control the outcome. Just don't let it ride, follow the curiosity you have inside you. Do the work still, don't just hope for outcome, but double down on your curiosity and experiment and see what happens.
Thank you. Where can people find you?
You can find me on LinkedIn and X at Mario Giancini. Most social media at my name as for my handle. And the place I want people to find me at is at self.engineer. And that's where I'm hoping to connect with most people. I have a version assessment tool that I put out recently that I want people to start taking for free to kind of get some trajectory and some things that we talked about here, kind of get some next steps and things of that nature that you could just have a starting point if you want to, make a change, if you want to evolve a little bit. And if you're looking for guidance or if you're looking for connection, I think it's a great way to start. And so my hope would be that people go to self.engineer, that website, and try it out.
Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, man.
Appreciate it.
I have loved this.
Same. This is a good episode.
Very good episode.
All right. Thanks, guys. We'll see you guys next time. Love you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to the Ben Nevares podcast. Check us out on iTunes, Spotify, and all other major podcast hosting platforms. Be sure to leave us a 5-star review on iTunes.